In a country where the color of your skin can still determine whether you're heard, or silenced, truth often arrives too late and justice comes with a cost. The summer heat in Atlanta felt thicker than usual, the kind that clung to your skin like guilt. Nia Caldwell wiped her forehead with the sleeve of her denim work shirt as she walked home from the restaurant where she worked the closing shift. It was nearly 1:30 a.m. The streets were mostly empty, except for the rhythmic hum of a distant car engine and the occasional rustle of wind through overgrown magnolia trees. Nia, 34, lived in a modest two-bedroom apartment on the west side of the city. She was a proud woman, quiet, hardworking, and respected in her community. A single mother of one, she raised her daughter Maya with strength, grace, and all the wisdom her mother had once instilled in her. She'd never had trouble with the law. Her record was clean. Her conscience, even cleaner. That night, just 2 blocks from her front door, everything changed. A black SUV with tinted windows screeched to a stop beside her. Within seconds, 3 men in plain clothes rushed out. One of them, a tall man with slick-back blonde hair and an FBI badge swinging from his neck, grabbed her by the arm. "Nia Caldwell," he said sharply. "You're under arrest for conspiracy to commit wire fraud and obstruction of justice." "What?" "No, I think you've got the wrong person." Nia stammered, her voice cracking. Her breath quickened as one of the men roughly cuffed her hands behind her back. "You have the right to remain silent," the blonde agent continued. Nia's world blurred. The lights, the street, the sting of the handcuffs, it was all too surreal. Neighbors peeked through their windows as the agents shoved her into the SUV. Some reached for phones. One neighbor, Ms. Denise, shouted, "What's going on?" "She ain't done nothin'." Inside the SUV, the air was cold and sterile. Nia tried to collect her thoughts. "I didn't do anything. Why am I being arrested?" The blonde agent didn't answer. His name was Special Agent Colton Reeves, and behind the stoic expression and neatly pressed suit, he was hiding a secret that threatened to unravel everything. For days earlier, Colton Reeves sat in a private conference room at the Atlanta field office of the FBI. He was nervous. Sweat pooled under his arms despite the air conditioning. On the screen in front of him was a financial audit report, one that connected his name to several unauthorized fund transfers totaling over $2.4 million. He knew the bureau was closing in. He'd made mistakes, and the Internal Affairs Division was sniffing around. His eyes drifted to the folder labeled, "Caldwell, Nia A." He opened it. Inside were documents that connected her loosely to a man named Robert Felton, a low-level cyber criminal she once dated in college. And that was all he needed. Colton forged documents. He planted evidence. He restructured the timeline to make it appear as if Nia had been in communication with Felton recently, that she'd laundered money through the restaurant where she worked. In reality, Nia hadn't spoken to Felton in over a decade. Colton's gamble was simple: deflect attention, buy time, and let someone else take the fall. Someone without power. Someone they wouldn't question. Someone like Nia. The first interrogation. Back in the federal holding facility, Nia sat across from Agent Colton in an interrogation room. The walls were gray. A single camera recorded their exchange. A bottle of water sat untouched on the metal table between them. "I've told you," Nia said. "I don't know anything about this money, or fraud, or whatever you're talking about." Colton leaned forward, his voice a bit softer this time. "We have proof, Nia. Digital records. Wire transfers. Communications. I know this is hard to accept, but if you cooperate, we might be able to reduce your sentence." "My sentence?" Her voice rose. "You're talking to me like I've already been found guilty. I want a lawyer." "You'll get one," he said, smirking faintly, "but the truth's going to come out either way." Nia's eyes narrowed. Something about him felt wrong. Too composed. Too certain. It was as if he'd already written the ending and was just watching her catch up. The courtroom. 2 weeks later, the U.S. District Court for the Northern District of Georgia convened for Nia's preliminary hearing. The courtroom was packed. Nia stood at the defense table beside her public defender, a young but razor-sharp attorney named Jacqueline Monroe. Across from them sat Agent Colton, smug and polished, flanked by federal prosecutors. The judge, the Honorable Patrice Ellison, a black woman in her 50s with a reputation for fairness and intolerance for corruption, presided. Agent Colton took the stand. He spoke calmly about the investigation, the supposed intelligence, and how Nia had attempted to obstruct a federal inquiry. He painted her as cunning, as connected to criminal activity, as someone who had slipped under the radar for years. Then, Nia stood. Jacqueline had prepped her carefully, but there was something burning in her heart that she couldn't hold back. She turned to the judge. "Your Honor, I know what's being said about me, and I know who I am. I've never touched stolen money. I've never laundered anything. But there's one person in this courtroom who has." Agent Colton Reeves. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. The judge leaned forward. "Ms. Caldwell, are you accusing a federal agent of committing the crimes with which you've been charged?" "Yes," Nia said clearly. "And of framing me to protect himself." The courtroom buzzed. Judge Ellison banged her gavel. "Order. This is a serious accusation, Ms. Caldwell. Do you have any basis for this claim?" "I know I didn't do it. And I believe Agent Reeves knows that too." The courtroom was thick with tension. Nia Caldwell's voice still echoed in the minds of every person present. "And I believe Agent Reeves knows that too." Her words were not just an accusation. They were a spark. A direct challenge to the authority, reputation, and truth of the U.S. justice system, delivered not in anger, but with the calm certainty of a woman who had spent her life telling the truth and watching others question it anyway. Judge Patrice Ellison adjusted her glasses and studied Nia carefully. This was not a woman grasping at straws. There was no desperation in her tone, no theatrics. Just steel. Just truth. "Court is adjourned for today," Judge Ellison said. "But I want to review the full discovery package, personally." Federal Prosecutor Matt Beringer leaned toward Colton Reeves, whispering urgently, "She could have just shot our case out the sky." Colton, tight-jawed, forced a smile. "She's bluffing. There's no evidence. We move forward." But he didn't sound confident. Not anymore. Back at the field office. Colton returned to the Atlanta FBI office and walked straight to his desk, ignoring greetings from coworkers. He opened his laptop and pulled up the falsified case files, PDFs he had edited, timestamp data he'd faked, metadata he'd wiped. Everything seemed in order. Still, he couldn't shake the sound of Nia's voice in that courtroom. The way she looked him dead in the eye when she said his name. She wasn't supposed to fight back. He closed the laptop and glanced around the office. Across the floor, Agent Darius Hunt, a black agent known for his meticulous investigative work, was watching him from behind his computer. Darius had been quietly reviewing parts of the Caldwell case for the past week. Something didn't add up. The digital evidence trail felt too clean, like it had been built, not discovered. He clicked open an email from an old contact at the Department of Justice's Digital Forensics Lab. The attachment showed the original hash values of files supposedly pulled from Caldwell's devices. The hashes didn't match the evidence submitted to the court. Forgery. It wasn't enough to make an accusation yet. But it was a start. The woman behind the strength. Meanwhile, Nia sat in the county jail, hands in her lap, staring through the cold steel bars. She'd been there nearly 2 weeks, and though her spirit hadn't broken, the weight was real. She missed Maya's voice, her laugh. Her daughter had been staying with Nia's sister, Aisha, who visited daily and reassured her, "We got you, sis. Everybody's behind you." Her lawyer, Jacqueline Monroe, walked in just before lights out. "They're rattled," she said. "Judge Ellison has ordered a review of the entire investigative file." Nia let out a breath she didn't realize she was holding. "So, she believes me?" "She believes something's not right. That's the crack. Now we widen it." Jacqueline placed her hand over Nia's. "We're not going to let them bury you." Community rising. Word of Nia's accusation and her unjust arrest had reached her neighborhood, and by the next morning, dozens of community members gathered outside the courthouse with signs that read, "Free Nia now. Innocent until proven guilty, even for us. Investigate the FBI." Reporters flocked to the story. The media loved a scandal, and this one had it all: race, corruption, and a brave woman calling out a federal agent in open court. A clip of Nia's words, caught by a courtroom sketch artist's phone, circulated social media. In it, she looked composed. Righteous. A new hashtag began trending, #BelieveNia. Inside the courthouse, Judge Ellison sat at her desk, watching the clip. "This woman didn't just accuse a federal agent on a whim," she murmured. "She's staring down the entire system." She picked up her phone and made a call to the FBI Internal Affairs Division. "Reopen the full background on Special Agent Colton Reeves. Quietly. I want to see every case he's touched in the last 5 years." The audit. Agent Darius Hunt had requested administrative access to the Caldwell case's original forensic documentation. At 1:17 a.m., he sat in his apartment, cross-referencing server logs and case files. That's when he found it. A .log file from the evidence storage drive showed Colton's user credentials accessing the folder on July 7, 2 days after the digital evidence had supposedly been submitted to the court and signed off. That was tampering. It meant Colton had gone back in and modified something. Darius forwarded the logs, metadata reports, and a memo to Internal Affairs under the subject line. Suspected evidence manipulation, Agent C. Reeves. He hesitated only a second before clicking send. Court resumes. The next week, the courtroom buzzed as Judge Ellison took her seat again. Nia was brought in, this time with her head held higher. She could feel the shift in the air. Jacqueline whispered, "They know." The judge opened the session. "I've reviewed the evidence submitted by the prosecution," she said slowly. "And I've also received material from an internal review by the FBI. It appears that certain files related to this case were altered post-submission." Gasps again. Jacqueline closed her eyes in relief. Colton sat stone still. "Until a full investigation is completed," the judge continued, "I am rejecting the charges against Ms. Caldwell. She is to be released immediately." Cheers erupted. Nia blinked back tears, unable to speak. "But let me be clear," Judge Ellison added, her voice firm. "This court does not take lightly the possibility that a sworn federal agent could manipulate evidence. This will not be buried. The fall begins." As Nia walked out of the courtroom into the sunlight, arms open to embrace her waiting daughter and sister, Agent Colton was escorted out the back, surrounded by Internal Affairs officers. The tables were turning. His smile was gone now. So was his badge. The sun burned golden over Atlanta's west side as Nia Caldwell stepped out of the courthouse. Reporters crowded behind barriers, microphones pointed in her direction, camera shutters clicking like distant gunfire. But their noise couldn't drown out the only sound that mattered, her daughter's voice. "Mommy." Maya ran across the sidewalk, tears streaming down her cheeks. Nia dropped to her knees just in time to catch her. For a long time, they didn't speak, just held each other. Mother and daughter. Survivor and child. It was the kind of embrace that said, I almost lost you and I'm still here. Nia's sister Aisha pulled them both into a hug. You're home, she whispered. Home, but not whole. That night, Nia sat on her couch in sweatpants, wrapped in a blanket, as Aisha made tea and Maya slept peacefully in the next room. Everything looked the same. The hallway light still flickered. The chipped tile by the sink hadn't fixed itself. But Nia felt like a ghost in her own life. I know this is hard to ask, Aisha said gently, but what happened in there? What did they even have on you? Nia stared at her hands. Nothing real. But they built it like it was. Said I was part of a fraud ring. That I'd laundered money through the restaurant. But you don't have access to the accounts. Exactly. She paused. Colton Reeves. He's the one who did it. Aisha frowned. That FBI guy? Nia nodded. He framed me to cover his own tracks. The words felt heavy in her mouth. She'd said them before, in the courtroom. But now she was free, and the pain came not from being disbelieved, but from knowing how close she'd come to never walking out at all. The court of public opinion. Colton Reeves had once been seen as a rising star in federal law enforcement, media-friendly, clean-cut, and eager to play the part. But the spotlight he'd once welcomed now scorched him. Local media outlets ran headlines like, FBI agent under investigation for framing black woman in fraud case. Judge throws out case against Atlanta mother after tampering allegations. #Believe Nia sparks nationwide demand for reform. Cable news picked up the story. Commentators debated the implications, some praised Nia's courage, others questioned how many more like her had been buried under false evidence. Social media exploded. Nia's name trended for 4 days straight. Civil rights organizations offered her legal counsel. Activists reached out for speaking engagements. But Nia didn't want any of that. She just wanted peace. Internal affairs dig deeper. At FBI headquarters, the internal investigation into Colton Reeves accelerated. His access logs were pulled. Forensic analysts dissected every case file he'd worked on in the last 7 years. What they found stunned even seasoned agents. Colton had a pattern: cases with questionable digital trails, defendants without resources, and always just enough evidence to compel a guilty plea. In 3 separate cases, his key evidence had been sole-sourced, no second agent ever saw it, no third-party confirmation ever requested. This wasn't carelessness. It was manipulation. Darius Hunt was promoted to assist in the inquiry. He worked late hours, following leads Colton thought were buried. And he kept coming back to one question. How many people had this man put behind bars? A visit from the Department of Justice. One afternoon, 2 sharply dressed officials from the DOJ knocked on Nia's door. Jacqueline Monroe, now fully on retainer thanks to pro bono support from the Southern Justice Foundation, met them at the steps. Nia doesn't owe you anything, Jacqueline said calmly. We're not here to question her, one of the officials replied. We're here to offer her an opportunity. Inside, over coffee, the DOJ explained what they needed. A testimony. Not just for Colton's trial, but for Congress. You've become the face of something bigger, Ms. Caldwell, said the younger agent, a woman named Yvette Jameson. People want to hear from you. I never asked for that, Nia replied. All I wanted was to be left alone. Raise my daughter. Live my life. I understand, Yvette said gently. But you were almost buried. And if we don't drag this into the light, someone else will be. Pain revisited. That night, Nia lay awake. Her hands rested over her stomach as she stared at the ceiling. Images from jail played in her mind like unwanted dreams. Cold meals. No privacy. The way the guards called her, inmate, like it was her name. She remembered the shame she felt when she saw Maya through the glass during visits, trying to explain why she couldn't come home. It wasn't just about justice now. It was about making sure no one else's child had to ask that question. Why can't mommy come home? The indictment. 2 weeks later, Colton Reeves was formally indicted in federal court. Charges included fabrication of evidence, obstruction of justice, conspiracy to violate civil rights under color of law, perjury under oath. The media lined the courthouse steps again, but this time, it wasn't for Nia. It was for him. Colton looked thinner now. The arrogance was gone. His attorney spoke on his behalf. We look forward to defending against these politically motivated charges. But behind closed doors, Colton was cracking. He'd requested a plea deal, one that would avoid jail time in exchange for resigning and quietly disappearing. The DOJ said no. This wasn't going away. Rebuilding. Nia stood in her backyard, watering the tomato plants Maya had helped her grow. Aisha came out with a letter in her hand. Another one from a woman in Illinois, she said. Says she saw your case and thinks her son might have been framed too. Worked with Colton. Nia didn't respond right away. I never wanted to be anyone's symbol, she said quietly. But you are now, Aisha said. And they believe you because you fought. The federal courtroom in Washington, D.C. was larger, colder, and far more sterile than the one in Atlanta where Nia Caldwell had first spoken her truth. It reeked of marble, money, and power, the kind of place where reputations were carved into stone or shattered like glass. It was April 8, 2025, and the United States of America versus Colton Reeves was set to begin. The defendant was a former special agent with the FBI. The star witness? Nia Caldwell. Pre-trial tension. Nia sat quietly at a long mahogany table, flanked by attorneys from the Department of Justice. Across the courtroom, Colton Reeves looked less like a federal agent and more like a man who hadn't slept in weeks. His once sharp hair had grown uneven, his jawline shadowed with stubble. The charges against him were serious: fabrication of federal evidence, obstruction of justice, perjury, and conspiracy to deprive U.S. citizens of civil rights. But the courtroom wasn't just filled with legal professionals. It was filled with history. Activists from across the country had come to witness the trial. Journalists scribbled notes, cameras captured courtroom sketches, and civil rights lawyers leaned in as if each word spoken might shape future precedent. From the back of the courtroom, Darius Hunt watched, arms crossed. He had helped gather the evidence that brought Colton to this seat. Now he watched justice unfold, or unravel. The prosecution's opening. Assistant U.S. Attorney Valerie Morton stood to open the case for the prosecution. Her voice was firm, every word landing like a deliberate strike. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this case is not just about one man's abuse of power. It is about the stain that such abuse leaves on every part of our system, on justice, on communities, on the innocent. She gestured toward Nia. This woman was nearly buried alive under false charges. And she is only one. What happens in this courtroom will say whether the truth can stand against the shield of power. The courtroom was silent, every juror leaning forward. Colton's defense. The defense was led by Thomas Braddock, a seasoned attorney known for defending government employees. This trial, he said, pacing deliberately, is an attempt to destroy a man who served his country with distinction. We will show that Agent Reeves acted within the bounds of his duties, and that what Ms. Caldwell endured, while tragic, was the result of institutional miscommunication, not criminal intent. But the jury didn't look convinced. Nia takes the stand. On the third day, Nia was called to testify. She took the oath, her right hand raised, her voice unwavering. Jacqueline Monroe, who sat in the gallery behind her, exhaled deeply. Nia's testimony began with who she was before her arrest: a small business owner, a mother, a sister, a woman working 2 jobs to provide for her daughter. Then she spoke about the arrest, how it happened in the middle of a morning delivery, how her employees had watched as she was handcuffed, how Maya cried herself to sleep for weeks. The courtroom was gripped. "And when you were in custody," Prosecutor Morton asked gently, "did you understand what you were being charged with?" "I didn't even understand why they were talking to me," Nia said. "I didn't know what the term wire fraud really meant. I hadn't done anything. But they treated me like I had already been convicted." Morton nodded. "And what happened when you asked for proof?" "They said the evidence came from a trusted federal agent. From Agent Colton Reeves." Nia turned to look directly at Colton. "And I knew then, I wasn't just fighting a charge. I was fighting him." Cross-examination. The defense attempted to rattle her. "Ms. Caldwell, did you ever have access to the business accounts in question?" "No." "Isn't it true that digital evidence showed transactions linked to your email?" "I don't know how that was planted, but I didn't make those transfers." "Can you prove that?" "I don't have to prove a crime I didn't commit. You have to prove that I did." There was a murmur in the gallery. Judge Royce Harris banged his gavel. "Order." But even the jurors looked impressed. Nia wasn't here to be steamrolled. She was here to stand. Cracks in Colton's armor. The next witness was Agent Darius Hunt. He brought documentation showing Colton had accessed the case folder after it was officially closed. He showed metadata inconsistencies, and a pattern of similar alterations in past cases. "Did any of these files have timestamps that were inconsistent with official logs?" the prosecutor asked. "Yes," Darius said. "The data suggests backdating and unauthorized edits. There's no doubt about it." "And were any other agents involved?" "Not according to our logs. Only Agent Reeves." Colton lowered his eyes. A surprise witness. Midway through the trial, the DOJ called a surprise witness, Malcolm Green, a man who had served 11 years in federal prison on a conviction tied to one of Colton's older cases. Released on appeal after the internal review, Malcolm walked into the courtroom with a slow, powerful stride. His testimony revealed a similar story: digital evidence he'd never seen before, files that appeared after his arrest, no opportunity to mount a fair defense. "I lost over a decade," he told the jury. "Because someone like him decided his win record was more important than the truth." The weight of the verdict. After 3 weeks of trial, closing arguments were made. The jury deliberated for 2 days. When they returned, the courtroom held its breath. "We, the jury, find the defendant, Colton Reeves, guilty. Guilty on all charges." The gallery erupted. Some cried. Some applauded. And some just sat in stunned silence. Colton didn't say a word. He was led out in cuffs. Judge Harris made a brief statement: "May this serve as a reminder that the law must be enforced with integrity. And when it is not, it will be challenged. No badge protects you from justice. Freedom redefined." Outside the courthouse, Nia stepped to a podium. She didn't want to speak to the media, but she knew her silence might be taken as fear. "I never asked to be in this position. But I was put here. And I chose to fight." She looked into the cameras, her voice steady. "This wasn't just about me. It was about every person who's been told their truth doesn't matter because someone more powerful said otherwise. Today, we made it matter." 2 months later, June 2025. Washington, D.C. The sentencing hearing for former FBI Special Agent Colton Reeves drew national attention. Protesters filled the steps outside the courthouse, holding signs that read, "Truth Matters, Justice for the Framed," and "Power Must Be Accountable." Inside, the courtroom brimmed with tension, rage, and hope. Colton sat still, his once confident posture replaced with stiff resignation. He had been found guilty on all charges: fabricating evidence, obstructing justice, conspiracy, and perjury. He had declined to speak during the trial. But now, during sentencing, Judge Royce Harris asked him if he wished to address the court. He stood, adjusted his suit collar, cleared his throat. "I believed I was protecting the country. Protecting people from criminals who knew how to hide behind the law." The gallery stirred. Nia Caldwell, sitting just behind the prosecution bench, didn't look away. "But I see now," he continued, his voice faltering, "that what I did, what I allowed myself to do, was wrong. I can't take back the years I stole. I can't fix what I broke. But I'm sorry." He sat. No eye contact. No tears. Judge Harris was silent for a moment before speaking. "You were a federal agent, entrusted with extraordinary power. And you abused it. Not once. Not by accident. But deliberately, repeatedly, and without remorse until the day you were caught." He paused. "I hereby sentence you to 27 years in federal prison. No parole. No leniency." The room erupted. Gasping. Crying. Some cheering. A few reporters ran out to file stories. Nia didn't move. Her eyes locked on the man who had nearly destroyed her life. And she felt, not satisfaction, but relief. Back in Atlanta. 2 days later, Nia stood in her restaurant's kitchen, Mama May's Soul House, watching steam rise from a fresh pot of collard greens. It was the first time she'd cooked since returning. The staff gave her space. Not out of fear, but reverence. Word had spread, Nia Caldwell wasn't just a business owner anymore. She was a national symbol for justice. People drove from across state lines to eat at the restaurant where, the lady who stood up to the FBI, once served fried catfish and sweet tea. "Hey," said Aisha, appearing in the doorway with a thick stack of letters. "Don't tell me those are all for me." "They are. Another bundle from people you've never met. Former inmates. Mothers. Lawyers. Kids. Even one from a retired judge in Oregon." Nia wiped her hands and sat down at the corner table. She read through them slowly. Some letters thanked her. Some begged her to keep fighting. One young woman wrote, "I never thought people like us could win. You proved me wrong." Tears welled in Nia's eyes. She had survived the fire. Now the world wanted her to carry the torch. Reform in motion. Behind the scenes, the Department of Justice was under pressure. Nia's case had sparked a congressional inquiry into FBI case conduct between 2010 to 2022. At least 9 cases tied to Colton Reeves were now being re-examined, and 2 men had already been released pending new trials. Nia met with members of the Congressional Black Caucus. She stood beside Senator Maya Bennett during the announcement of the Caldwell Act, a proposed federal law requiring third-party digital audit trails for federal prosecutions and harsher penalties for officers who falsify evidence. "This bill," Senator Bennett said, "is about accountability. Because the truth should not depend on the power of the person who speaks it." Nia didn't speak at the press conference. But when the cameras turned away, she leaned into Senator Bennett and whispered, "Thank you for not letting this die quietly." An invitation. That night, Nia received a call from the National Civil Rights Museum in Memphis. They wanted to honor her at their annual gala. "We're presenting you with the Echo of Justice Award," the organizer said. For speaking truth where silence was expected. I'm not a hero, Nia replied. No, the voice said. But you're what we needed. Facing her reflection. Maya sat in the living room with her math homework, flipping through fractions. Mama, she said, are you famous now? Nia smiled and joined her on the couch. I don't know about that. But some people know what happened. And they're listening. Did you win? Nia paused. Thought about it. I didn't lose, she said. That's what matters. Maya leaned against her shoulder. You're brave, Mama. A movement awakens. In the months that followed, Nia was invited to universities, justice panels, and community meetings. Not as a celebrity, but as a witness. A survivor. At one event in New Orleans, she stood beside 3 formerly incarcerated men who had been released thanks to new evidence in their cases, evidence that had been hidden, manipulated, or ignored. One of them, a man named Elijah, hugged her and said, "Your fight opened the door for mine." The room burst into applause. It wasn't just about Colton Reeves anymore. It was about every Colton Reeves still out there. Healing comes slowly. Some nights, Nia still woke in a cold sweat, memories of her cell, of Maya's tear-streaked face during visitation, of being spoken to like a criminal. She saw a therapist. Started journaling. Let herself cry when she needed to. And in time, she began to heal. Not erase. But grow. Justice is not the end. One day, as she sat alone in her restaurant after closing, Darius Hunt dropped by. I wanted to say something, he said, standing awkwardly near the doorway. You already did, Nia replied. In court. No, this is different. Back when I first got involved in your case, I wasn't sure if we'd be able to prove anything. But I knew you were telling the truth. I just want you to know. I'll never forget what you did. Nia stood, offered him a hand. You helped make sure it wasn't just words. They shook hands. Then sat. And talked. Not about justice. Not about prison. Just 2 people who still believed change was possible. By September 2025, the U.S. Capitol had seen something rare, real hope. After months of debate, the Caldwell Act, named for the woman who survived the system and exposed its flaws, Nia Caldwell, was signed into law. The law would provide stronger oversight of federal prosecutions, provide independent reviews of FBI cases, and expand protections for whistleblowers like Darius Hunt. It was a step, a powerful one, but it couldn't undo the years Nia had lost behind bars. Still, the system, this time, was holding itself accountable. At the signing, Nia stood next to Senator Maya Bennett, her hands still, her face calm. She wasn't celebrating. She was witnessing. Back in Atlanta, Nia walked out of her restaurant, handing over day-to-day control to her friend Aisha. She needed time, not to retreat, but to rebuild herself. She traveled, wrote, and reconnected with Maya, who now proudly declared that she wanted to be a judge, like those who listen. The letters kept coming in, thousands, from wrongfully convicted people, students, and families. Some asked for help. Others simply said thank you. One day, Darius Hunt returned, this time with 2 new young agents. They're part of the new Civil Rights Division, he said. Your work made this possible. They shook Nia's hand and promised to do better. She looked them in the eye. Then do it honestly, she said. A mural appeared in Chicago, Nia's face with roses growing from her headband. The words beneath it read, "Let the silence fear her name." Her story became a documentary. She missed the premiere, watching it instead from the couch with Maya. I don't need awards, she told her daughter. I got my life back. On a quiet Sunday, Nia visited her mother's grave. They tried to bury me, she whispered, but I was a seed. She sat for hours, calm in the silence she once feared. That winter, her letter was published across the country. My name is Nia Caldwell. I was accused of a crime I didn't commit. I survived, but others will not unless we change this system. I write this to remind all those who have been silenced, you are not invisible. And you are not done yet. Nia didn't plan to become a symbol. But she became a legacy. And her voice still rings out, where justice once whispered, now speaking out loud. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss new interesting stories.